Let's get some analysis on this now. Oona Hathaway is a professor of international law and the director of the Center for Global Legal Challenges at Yale Law School. She joins us now. Oona, thanks so much for speaking to us. It is a tough battle you're trying to fight. Congress did not agree that U.S. action to support Saudi in Yemen actually violated U.S. or even international law, really, mainly because, according to the U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. forces are not engaged in actual hostilities. So tell us about the legal approach you're taking now.
Yeah, so what you're referring to was an effort by several members of Congress to end support for the Saudi-led coalition and end weapons sales to the Saudi-led coalition, which the U.S. has been engaged in for about a year now, since it stopped and then it restarted them. And you're right that the argument that was made was that this was a violation of the War Powers Act, and therefore the president didn't have the right to do this by himself. He had to go to Congress. That argument, I think, fell flat. But what you did see was a great deal of discomfort in Congress with support for the actions of the Saudi-led coalition, and a real sense that Congress's patience is beginning to wear thin.
Okay, but for the members of Congress who voted against taking action to prevent U.S. involvement with Saudi via the war in Yemen, it's about protecting common security interests of U.S. allies and the interests that the United States shares with Saudi Arabia. They see Iran as a very serious security threat to their allies and to the United States itself. So it's hard to try to convince members of Congress that that doesn't matter, that they need to only look at the legal aspects and not see what they view as a wider security threat to U.S. interests.
Yeah, it's a very complicated situation, and I think members of Congress recognize that. Of course, they're concerned with lots of different actors involved in Yemen. On the one hand, there's concerns that Iran may be providing support to the Houthis, although exactly how much support and the nature of that support is really not well known. Obviously, Saudi Arabia has real concerns about the instability in Yemen. There had been missiles launched from Yemen into Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has been an important strategic partner of the United States in the region. And so to the extent that it feels threatened, the United States certainly wants to provide support. So there are a lot of things going on here that help explain U.S.'s willingness to support the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen. I think it also matters that it is a coalition. It's not a single state. There are many states from the region that are participating in the operation, and so it doesn't seem like a one-off or a kind of single outlier actor, but a number of states that are participating in the operation, which I think probably lends a sense of concern that this is a real threat to the stability of the region more generally. So I think all of those are playing a role here.
Okay.
Plus the fact, of course, that there's money to be made from the weapons sales. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to get to that in a second, but I want to ask you personally, why do you want to kind of fight this battle? Is it just because you're an attorney and you're interested in how this could work out legally, or is there something more human and personal from your perspective here?
Well, look, I think part of the concern for me personally is you're seeing lots of evidence of massive violations of international humanitarian law by the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen. We see event after event where civilians are being killed, and it does not appear that they had any relationship to the conflict or playing any role in the conflict. A UN panel on experts has found a number of violations of international humanitarian law. There was a bombing just recently of a wedding, a previous bombing of a funeral. I mean, this is really horrific, and it's created one of the most significant humanitarian crises crises in the region and indeed in the world. You have a huge portion of the population in Yemen is food insecure.
Right.
Many people are starving and dying as a result of this conflict.
But I mean, is there any precedent for this?
And I think we just, we feel responsible for that.
Okay, but and have we seen this before in the United States?
There's lots of precedents.
I mean, we look back to the 80s when the United States was supporting the Contras. But still, Oona, the reality in that is that nobody was really held accountable for the U.S. participation in that war that fought the Sandinista rebels.
Well, and there was a real reaction to that after, of course, you probably know that there was quite a scandal in the United States around the funding of the Contras through some backroom deals. There are many people who were criminally prosecuted over that. And there have been many laws since then that provide that the United States can't provide support to states that are engaging in human rights violations. What we call the Leahy Law requires Leahy vetting of any providing of support to a state that's engaging in human rights violations. So there are a lot of laws that have changed since then, in part because of those events.
But it's tough, though, because
that's part of what we're concerned about.
Right, but and as you alluded to earlier, the issue of just supplying weapons to parties that are involved in severe human rights abuses around the world. I mean, the UK, it's also a controversy there that they've been supplying weapons to the Saudis that are used to take innocent lives in Yemen. It's in contravention of international law to participate in the killing of innocent civilians. Why does it seem this is not being stopped, really, on any level?
Well, the laws are actually pretty unclear, is part of the reason for that. The rules that were created after World War II created a set of very clear rules for, that regulate states when they go to war with each other. They don't provide very clear rules for what happens when states are fighting with non-state actors or when states are providing support to other states through financial means or selling of weapons in their operations against either other states or non-state actors. And so part of the problem here is the rules are just not very clear. And part of the problem here is that it's not clear whether the Saudi-led coalition intends to be killing civilians illegally, or whether, in fact, this is just a failure of training or intelligence or something else. And so there's real questions around intent, which is necessary for this to, in fact, be illegal. But the Saudi-led coalition seems to be clearly engaging in violations of international humanitarian law. And that is raising real and important questions in states that are funding and supporting that coalition about whether they should continue that support.
Okay. Oona Hathaway, unfortunately, we will have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us on the Newsmakers.